Winston Churchill once said, "Water is such a bleak beverage." According to all the sources, Churchill knew the difference between fine wine and plain cold water. He knew that water was a bleak beverage by now. So Churchill would have very much sympathized with the wedding couple of Cana that day when their wine ran out and the party was shutting down. The wine had run out and the guests were beginning to look for their coats to go home. Now, in our day, we could handle a situation like that by just sending someone to Fred Meyer to pick up anything that we were lacking. But that's not the way things worked in a first century village. They didn't have grocery stores. The family, the wedding family, had been getting ready literally for months for this occasion. For months, they had been baking things and making things and preparing food. And months in advance, they would have gone to every winemaker in the whole area to make sure that they would have enough wine, because they knew there'd be a huge crowd. And they also knew that if other families were having a wedding at about the same time, they'd be trying to buy wine too. So the family was absolutely focused on having enough wine for the whole event. And then on the wedding day, all the guests would come. There'd be a wedding ceremony, but then everybody would come to the groom's house. All the guests would come, family, relatives, neighbors. And the wedding feast would go on for 7 days. For at least a week, the wedding feast took place. And there would be non-stop singing and dancing and eating and drinking day and night. And when it was all over, for months after that, the people of the village would say, "Wasn't that a great feast? Wasn't that a wonderful family celebration that we were a part of?" But that's not what they were going to be saying in Cana. Not when the wine ran out. For months afterwards, literally for years afterwards, the family would be shamed. They would be embarrassed. People would be saying, "Can you believe them? They ran out of wine. What were they, a little cheap when they bought the wine? What's going on?" The family would be looked down upon by everybody in the village. Well, Jesus was there that day for the wedding, Jesus and his disciples, and Jesus decided to act. Jesus decided to do something. He doesn't want his friends to feel shamed. Now, the village of Cana, if you look on a map, on an old map, the village of Cana is very near the village of Nazareth, where Jesus grew up. And so it's very probable that Jesus knew the couple being married, that they were personal friends. There's even some speculation that they were relatives of his. His mother Mary was there, Jesus' disciples were there. He really knew the people, they were childhood friends, and so he didn't want them to be shamed. It was actually his mother who came first and told him they'd run out of wine and urges him to do something. And Jesus resisted at first, said it was too soon. But then very, very quickly, Jesus tells the servants of the household to go to where they had huge vessels of water. Typically at the entranceway of a Jewish home, they would have big vessels, big jars, big urns of water. It says that could hold up to 30 gallons of water each. And he said, go to where that water is, fill them to the brim, and then take some of the water to the wine steward, kind of the wedding coordinator for the event. They were happy to give him the details and give him some of that. And of course, when they got there, the water had not just become wine, it had become the best wine. It had become 180 gallons of wine. Can you imagine having a party and then suddenly having 180 gallons of wine? With that, the party would be able to last at least another day or so. Theologians in the Middle Ages, when they talked about the wedding of Cana, when they were commenting on the meaning of the different stories, when they talked about the wedding of Cana, they said, here's what the story means. Jesus turned water to wine because Jesus could not refuse anything his mother asked him to do. Jesus was a good son. He would never refuse his mother. And then the theologians would say to their audience that was listening, now you too need to obey your mother. And then they would say, you also need to obey Mother Church, which was them. They were Mother Church. So it was a story about obedience. Well, that could be one of the meanings of the story, about listening to your mom and doing what she said. I think the deeper meaning of the story is that two things. Jesus, on the one hand, did not want people to be shamed. To be shamed in the world, to be treated with indignity in the world, to be treated as lower and lesser is a wound to all of us. We know that. Jesus did not want people to be shamed. And to say it positively, Jesus wanted people to be filled with life, with joy. Jesus as the embodiment of God, Jesus as the Word made flesh, it's God's will that we be filled with life and with joy. And that's what the wine means. That's what the wedding feast is about. Later on in the Gospel of John, this story is in John chapter 2, later on in John chapter 10, Jesus summarizes his whole ministry by saying to his disciples, I have come that you might have life and have it abundantly. Jesus wants abundant life for us. Jesus wants 180 gallons of life for us. And Jesus wants life for us at all the different levels of our life. Anywhere where we need life, that's where Jesus wants life for us. Jesus wants, we're made up of different components. Jesus wants life for our souls, for our spirits. Jesus wants life for us in our relationship to God. Jesus wants life for us in our relationships. Our relationships get fractured. Jesus wants life for us in our relationships. Jesus wants life for us in our bodies. Jesus is always going around and healing people and feeding people. Jesus wants life for us in the very real physical needs we have each day. Jesus wants life for our communities and for our nations and for the world. And so Jesus is always taking people from different national groups and bringing them together and revealing to their family. Wherever we need life, Jesus wants to come and give life. And so this story of the wedding of Cana is a symbol of that. It's a metaphor of that. And just when the life of the party seems to wear out, Jesus comes with 180 gallons because Jesus wants abundant life for us in every aspect. Now, wine is a dangerous symbol to use as the work of God. Talking about alcohol and a wild wedding party where everybody gets drunk is a dangerous way to talk about what God's work in Jesus is working. The reason I say that is each one of us knows someone in our own family, maybe ourselves or someone we know, who has made some bad choices about overusing alcohol and they have brought pain to their life. We know of people who struggle with alcohol addiction. And so that needs to be registered here, that we're not just cracking jokes about drinking and wild parties and not admitting that there are problems associated with that. We need to be wise about that. In some cases, that means just not touching alcohol at all. So wine is a dangerous symbol, but it's interesting. Frederick Buechner, one of the great Christian writers, one of his books called Wishful Thinking, says the very fact that wine is a dangerous symbol actually makes it an excellent symbol for what the Spirit of Christ does in our lives. Let me read you just a little piece of this. Frederick Buechner is writing about the wedding of Cana, and this is what he says. We should not confuse the wine that Jesus made with the watered-down grape juice that gets served in disposable plastic glasses. He says, wine is booze. Wine is dangerous and drunk-making. It changes how we think and see. It alters our behavior. Therefore, he says, it is a splendid symbol for the gift of the Spirit of Christ in our life. It is a splendid symbol for the abundance of blessing that Jesus wants to pour on us. Because like wine, the gifts of Jesus, it changes us. Drinking the blessing of Christ changes how we think and see. It alters our behavior. We never walk the same way again. That is what this wedding of Cana story is that Christ wants to come to us and pour out the blessings, pour out the life in any spot in our lives where we need it. And we will just never walk the same again. We will always walk differently after that. That's something that can be talked about as something individual and also something collective. Here's what I mean about that. Individually, we probably all know that there are times in our life where we just seem to run dry, where we just really seem to run out of what we need. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day who lives in another city who just said he's just feeling exhausted and worn out these days. He started a new business, which is great. He's loving it. He's having a good time. He's pouring himself into his new business day and night. But he doesn't want to just totally ignore his family and his wife in the process, so he's also trying to spend time with his kids, going to sport events and being with his wife. He also has started a remodeling project in the basement of his house, and he's involved in different kinds of civic volunteer things. He's doing all this stuff. Every bit of it is good, but he is dried up. He is exhausted. He needs life to be poured back into